Stop limiting yourself. Realize that there are unlimited amount of things that you can do with your life. Unleash your potential. Now, what does the word unleash mean? To let happen or begin something so powerful that once it begins, it cannot be controlled. कोई ऐसी दमदार चीज़ जो एक बार शुरू हो गई तो फिर नियंत्रित कर पाना बहुत मुश्किल है. Now, what does the word potential mean? The possibility or capacity for action. हमारी क्षमताएं और संभावनाएं. Philosophically, is there anything in physics with which you can relate this word unleash? The kinetic energy. Kinetic energy is a measure of work an object can do by virtue of its motion. कोई भी चीज़ जो अपनी गति की वजह से कुछ काम कर पाए, उस काम का मेजरमेंट कहलाता है काइनेटिक एनर्जी. डेमो दे, मान लो कि हवा एक ऑब्जेक्ट है एंड अपनी गति की वजह से वो सेलिंग शिप्स को चला पा रही हैं. तो we'll say that sailing ships employ the kinetic energy of the wind. Similarly, एक बुलेट में क्या ही हिम्मत की वो कुछ कर पाए, but when it is fired with some speed, it can pierce the board. So how could this bullet do that? Because of its motion. Bullet has mass and it was in motion. What is motion? Change in position of an object with respect to its surroundings in a given time interval. Now this has something to do with velocity, and magnitude of velocity is speed, mass, speed. So we define kinetic energy as half mass speed square, which simply means that a 70 kg athlete running with a speed of 10 meters per second will have a kinetic energy of 3500 joules. Now, as I already discussed in my previous videos, kinetic energy and work done have a connection. So both are scalars with same dimensions and same units. So I asked you to unleash your potential. Convert your potential energy into kinetic energy. Potential energy is the stored energy. A stretched string possesses potential energy. उसको ऐसी configuration में रखने से कुछ तो energy store हुई है, because when it is released, the arrow flies off at a great speed. अगर energy store ना हुई होती तो ये सब possible कैसे था? उसी stored energy का नाम हमने दिया है potential energy. Now let us talk about our planet Earth. इसकी सतह इतनी स्मूथ है क्या जैसे दिख रही है? नहीं. The Earth has 4 major layers: the inner core, outer core, mantle and the crust. So this crust and the top of the mantle, they make up a thin skin on the surface of our planet. तो जो skin है ये एक single piece नहीं है, but it is made up of many pieces like a puzzle covering the surface of the Earth. Not only that, but these pieces keep slowly moving around, sliding past one another and bumping into each other. So we call these puzzles the tectonic plates, and the edges of these plates are called plate boundaries. So the Earth's crust consists of these moving tectonic plates. So these plates can be thought of as pieces of a cracked shell which rest on the hot molten rock of Earth's mantle, and they fit snugly, comfortably. Now the heat from the radioactive processes from the Earth's interior, they cause these plates to move, sometimes towards and sometimes away from each other. This movement is called plate motion or tectonic shift. Now these plate boundaries are made up of many faults, and most of the earthquakes around the world occur on these faults. So what are these faults? These faults are the cracks in the Earth's crust along which there is movement. So these can be massive or very small. Now if some tension builds up along these faults and it is suddenly released, it will result in an earthquake. So certain terms will help you to describe these faults. In the cross-sectional view of a fault, the rock above the fault zone is called the hanging wall, and the rock below the fault zone is called the footwall, which simply means that the terms hanging wall and footwall refer to the relative position of the plates after a movement. So there are 3 major types of faulting that can occur. Talking about the first type, it's the normal faulting, which occurs when the 2 plates, they move away from one another, causing one to slide down relative to the other. The block above the inclined fault moves down relative to the block below the fault, and it results in extension. So second type is when the plates are compressed or pushed together, which results in reverse or thrust faulting. One plate was pushed up onto the other plate. The block above the inclined plane moves up relative to the block below the fault. This motion is caused by compressional forces and it results in compression. Now these faults are categorized by a dip, which simply refers to the angle of the fault planes relative to the horizontal. तो किसी भी fault का अगर dip less than 45 degrees है तो हम क्या कहेंगे? That is a low angle fault. उसका angle कम है, less steep है. तो the difference between the reverse and the thrust fault is simply in this dip. Thrust faults are categorized by a dip of 45 degrees or less, which simply means that reverse fault has a steeper dip as compared to the thrust fault. Now, vertical faults are perpendicular to the horizontal with the dip angle approximately 90 degrees. This enables us to define the last category of faulting, which is the strike-slip faulting. Here the two plates are moving horizontally past one another like two cars going in opposite directions on a highway. So movement of the blocks along the fault is horizontal and the fault plane is nearly vertical. होता क्या है? Since the edges of the plates are rough, they get struck while the rest of the plate it keeps moving. So ये जो configuration है, this configuration is building up tension. और उसकी वजह से the energy that is required to unstick the edges of the plates, that is being stored. When the plates have moved far enough, this stored energy is suddenly released, which results in earthquake. So the force of the moving blocks has to overcome the force of friction, and when this happens, all of the stored energy is released. Now this stored energy, it radiates outwards from the fault in all directions in form of seismic waves. Like ripples on a pond, these seismic waves shake the earth as they move through it. And when these seismic waves, they reach the earth's surface, they can shake the ground and anything on it. When earthquake is what happens when the two blocks of the earth, they suddenly slip past one another. The surface where they slip is called the fault or a fault plane. So the location below the earth's surface where the earthquake actually starts, it is called the hypocenter, and the location directly above this point on the earth's surface, it is called the epicenter. Now let us suppose I have a ball of mass m. What is the gravitational force acting on it? It is mg, where g is the acceleration due to gravity. Now this g can be treated to be constant near the earth's surface. What do we mean by this? Now if I am holding this ball at a height h above the earth's surface, and this height h is much less as compared to the radius of the earth, I can assume that this g, this acceleration due to gravity, is constant, 9.8 meters per second square approximately. Now if this height h is comparable with the radius of earth, there will be variation of this acceleration due to gravity with respect to height, which will be the topic for discussion when we talk about gravitation in our upcoming videos. For the present case, we can ignore this variation of g near the earth's surface. Now if I raise a ball to a height h, I am doing some work against the force of gravitation. The force of gravitation is in the downwards direction. My direction is this, and the displacement is also in the upwards direction. So work done is force dot displacement. So the work done by the external agency, which is me in the present case, will be mgh. It comes out to be positive. I have raised a ball to a height h, and because of this configuration, there is a stored potential energy. Stored energy, which is potential energy. This work gets stored in form of potential energy. So we define something called gravitational potential energy of an object, which is simply the negative of the work done by the gravitational force in raising an object to that height, which will be mgh, equal to the work done by the external agency. Now this will be a function of height h. Now if this height is variable, what is the gravitational force? We define it as the negative derivative of the gravitational potential energy of an object with respect to the height. Now this comes out to be negative minus mg, which simply indicates that gravitational force is acting in the downwards direction. अभी जो बॉल थी at a height h, it is suddenly released and it will come down with an increasing speed. So what will be the speed when it hits the ground? It can be calculated using one of the kinematic equations of rectilinear motion with constant acceleration. So initial speed is 0, so v square will be 2gh, where h is the height from which it falls. Now last thing that we have to do over here is multiply this entire equation by half m and see what you get. This expression simply shows that the gravitational potential energy of an object at a height h, when it is released, manifests as kinetic energy of the object on reaching the ground. जो पोटेंशियल एनर्जी स्टोर्ड थी इस बॉल में एज अ रिजल्ट ऑफ इट्स कॉन्फ़िगरेशन क्या कि इसको हमने हाइट h पे होल्ड कर रखा है, वो पोटेंशियल एनर्जी अपने आप को काइनेटिक एनर्जी में तब्दील कर लेगी जब ये बॉल ग्राउंड तक पहुंचेगी. That was all for today. I hope you liked my video and the content was informative. I'll see you in my next video. Unleash your potential.